How are you today?
Hey Annabelle, good. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I feel relaxed for a change. It's nice.
You seem so calm.
Yeah. I thought the Democrats put together a pretty good convention yesterday. So I'm relatively happy about it. There were times when I found it excruciatingly boring and I completely got distracted and did other stuff, but overall, I guess it was pretty good. My news feed is full of people who seem very fired up and ready to go. So I guess that was a success. What did you think of it? I know you watched a good part of it.
I did. It was, hey, it's super tough to do a convention without a convention. So to do it the way they did it, I found it pretty lame, to be honest. It was pretty boring, a lot of platitudes. And then there was Michelle Obama, and that was like, boom, nailed it. But the rest of them were just, it was a shame because they just read scripts glazed. You could see them on teleprompters, by themselves, no energy. So she made the case, I thought, very effectively. But the rest of it, um, they interviewed a lot of people this year, and that was sort of interesting. Anytime you get away from these politicians speaking, they're so in their platitudes, which is so boring, and you get to real people, that's at least interesting. So some of those were interesting, but yeah, I thought it was a real snooze fest for the most part, and it took a while to
Yeah.
hear Michelle Obama. I was, of course, disappointed with my buddy, a friend, supporter, someone I like, John Kasich. I just thought his thing, he was at a crossroads, but he was at a fork in the road, and it was a drone flying above him, and it was, so I think it was great that he spoke, but I really like him a lot, but it was kind of a lame delivery. So I think it's very hard technically to pull this off in the
hmm
time of a pandemic.
I wanted to ask you if we could compare our news feeds.
Yes, you mentioned that last
Yeah,
time.
yeah, I'm curious because, of course, I have a very biased news feed.
So I figured I'd show you what I would call far right material that
hmm
you're most unlikely to see yourself.
Okay.
And then I'll explain the themes that are showing up. So it starts with this video right here of a Black Lives Matter mob beats white man unconscious after making him crash his truck. This thing has circulated. I have seen this maybe 24 times. There's one part of this that's very graphic. The guy is sitting up and someone just comes over and kicks him in the head. And now people are tweeting. So this is sort of being followed. And now, evidently, since someone he's been killed, he's dead. And so this is a very constant type of feed, and it basically says the mainstream media doesn't cover this. It only matters, if it was a white police officer with a black person, but it doesn't cover the other stuff. So that's a very common theme, and the themes about law and order and Black Lives Matter and Antifa are the most common. Uh, the next one is the Black Lives Matter leaders now says white people's churches should all calm down. No idea of the context. Most of these, the interesting thing is there's no context. So, but I'm just sharing the memes as they circulate. Churches, violence, Black Lives Matter, and Antifa are kind of the themes. Uh, Obama defends mob rule. So you're seeing the theme is mob rule is, and I think that's the biggest fear that many people will have voting for Democrats. They went after Oprah, so you're seeing the racial thing is super clear. There's a lot of it is racial. It's never explicitly said racial, but it's obviously I've just showed you all black leaders. This is just a burning that Antifa is doing of materials in one city, and it compares it to the Nazi burnings. This is a graveyard where the stones have been all painted over with Black Lives Matter. A lot, so you see a lot of it's about sacred spaces, churches, holy spaces that have been desecrated. This whole theme, I don't know if you saw this, but this got a huge. I've probably seen this. I'm not even looking. It shows up maybe 40 times. Rioters splash paint on an elderly woman and get in her face and scream at her. This woman was trying to protect a building, I guess. This guy's yelling at her, and what he's yelling is, "This isn't your world anymore, lady." And they actually throw paint on her, so you can see there she's fighting back. That got a lot of circulation. These are all, if you notice, all very emotional. They're very fear-based, and it's a very scary world out there. And the theme underlining this is if we Republicans lose, this is what happens. And here's another one where a Black Lives protester draws a gun on an innocent driver. That was a video. This also became a theme with Canon Hinnett. I never really heard much about this in any of the mainstream media, but it really has circulated. A young 5-year-old, was shot by this gentleman here next door. I don't know. I for the life of me cannot figure out the details. I try to research it a little bit, but the overall thing is they keep saying say his name, and they're playing off of where you're required to say black people who've been murdered say their name is a constant theme, and they're saying say his name, and so this theme of say his name has circulated a lot. Here's his murderer. Again, a lot of this is fear. Police rape suspects that were freed are committed. This man killed the woman who charged him. So there's a lot of crime. This is more bad humor if you're a progressive, but it's, oh my God, sis, I love what you've done to the place. Thanks. I wanted to feel more like home. So she's from Somalia. And then the final video, the image below it is Somalia all blown up. Those circulate quite a bit. This is more humorous, but it's just the Democrats. They were talking about Jim Comey, Access Hollywood, kids in cages, Russia's coalition pitch, and they're using this very common meme now. It's the post office, and again, African American mayor of Chicago mounts a police raid on a church. So you're seeing these pretty common themes of race, church, and being raided, and then just a lot of police cars. This is an older one. This is not this is during the protest, but a lot of police cars being attacked, and a lot celebrating the fact that the New York Police Department union endorsed Trump this week, and that's for the first time. That's been highly circulated, and then just memes like this are pretty common. When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes duty. Little frightening, because I know exactly what they're talking about. That we have the right to fight this. These are tyrants who are taking over, the progressives, and we have an obligation to rebel. It's the same sort of rhetoric we would see in the Civil War. So that rhetoric keeps circulating. So I would say the themes that I have a lot of progressives on my feed too. The progressives are very snarky. It's jokes about Trump's weight or images, funny images. And kind of funny. These are really frightening. If these people take over, old people will be assaulted in the streets, police cars will be attacked, women will be raped, cities will burn down, guns will be pulled on people who travel into cities, and violence. We'll see just this, unprotected violence, and that's what I am seeing on my social media feed. That I would say is very unlikely that you see. Have you seen any of this?
No, I haven't seen any of those. I mean, I heard about the little boy, Cannon, I guess his name, but I haven't seen those particular images. I do want to share some stuff from some of the very progressive meme-based Facebook pages, and I'm sure you've seen these, but I just wanted to kind of compare stories.
Good
right?
idea.
There's a special place in hell for Christians who teach their children how to hate.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot of anger towards what they believe is just hatred directed at minorities and oppressed groups coming from the right, especially the Christian right. Another example, like both sides chanting, lock them up.
Yeah, it really is parallel.
Like that is, yeah. So you could hear that on the left and the right, lock them up. So, so in this case, we're talking about Trump Jr., Bannon, and Kushner, but it could be some other cast of characters next week. But there's a lot of talk about prisons and locking people up. And then, the post office situation, to me, is very alarming. But
Hmm.
I take the point of that meme that you shared, that it's like there's always something that we're all just worked up about. But I do feel like the post office not operating and being sabotaged is very, very disconcerting, and I'm quite upset about it.
One
How
of the
about
hardest
you?
things, yeah, well, one of the hardest things in this world we're in right now, and the
Mm-hmm.
reason why you and I take our time to try to do these podcasts is it's extremely hard to know
Mm-hmm.
what's true.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody just sent me a video of a pic of all the post office boxes piled up and said this was from 10 years ago. I don't know what to believe, and what's interesting is I don't personally, I read the New York Times and the Washington Post now as left leaning documents. Like I look at them as putting their thumb on the scales. Maybe Wall Street Journal is a little bit more balanced. But I read them with a like, oh yeah, well, they're going to be arguing the progressive side. So there's not like a guaranteed true source that I can like figure out what's going on with the post office. Um, I personally think NPR tries to do a good job. I know people laugh when I say that, but I think they really do. But it really is. And so as it gets harder to have any source that is authoritative, what we're doing is living in memes and bubbles that are communicating these cartoons and messages to us that reinforce our viewpoint or move us a little bit more in a radical perspective with fear. It looks like on the my side, on the far right, if you will, there's more fear being used than I always thought that the progressives would be using fear, but it looks like mine is very fear based. It's very emotional. It's very much
Mm-hmm.
you're going to lose your way of life. They're coming for you. You'll be pulled out of
Mm-hmm.
your car. It's very scary. This seems a little bit more like lack of justice. You want more justice and so forth. But it's like an argument. It's less
Mm-hmm.
emotional, it seems.
Mm-hmm. So let's look at this meme for a second.
Okay,
Have you seen this one?
I have not.
Yeah. I wonder what your friends would think about this. But but yeah, I guess that this is kind of the standard progressive take on it. Is like, blacks never really get a chance
Oh,
to
okay. Yeah, I have sort of
complain.
seen I have seen
Yeah.
progressives make the case that, yeah. So that's really how the two sides see each other. The progressive side would say that the white person really just doesn't want black people, wants black people to be shut up about being murdered by the police. I don't believe that's true, and that the alt right or the right memes that I'm seeing are saying essentially um, they don't care, they don't want to report the narrative that there is violence in the black community, and so they only cover it one way. And so um, I think that's they're both coming at it uh, that the other side isn't really being honest in what it wants.
Okay. So here's another theme,
Yes.
um, that, my goodness, the Trumps have no class. They're as base and as low as you can go.
Yeah,
Um,
it is. But I know Michelle made that comment very famous. But do we really think that Democrats have not gone low in attacking Trump, or have not sort of gone after his kid, his wife, his
mhm,
daughter? I mean,
mhm.
So I'm just saying it seems to be pretty fair. We're in a culture that's pretty vicious on both sides.
Yeah. Well, I think Michelle Obama spoke to that. Like, let's not do this. She
She
reiterated
did.
it because we didn't heed her advice before.
She did.
Um, yeah, but she was trying to talk to all of us, saying like, really, please stop doing that. It's not helping.
She
And
did.
she showed us how you could call out Trump without being vicious and hateful, just
I thought she did a
stating
great
it
job. Yeah. Yeah, I think she
matter
did
of
a great job.
factly.
I thought she did a
Yeah.
great job. Let's talk about this one for a minute, okay? The one you have up now.
Hmm.
Notice the attack on churches on the
Hmm.
left. How many of the things have been with some sort of negative mention of people of faith?
Hmm.
And on my feed, look how many people of faith are afraid of being attacked. And I'm telling you, this is to me the untold underground narrative that's really fueling a lot of this.
Hmm.
Um, there's a lot of people on the left that want to at least check churches, or even take away their funding for their tax deductibility for their discrimination and homophobia, for example. And there's a lot of people on the right who feel that if Trump loses, they lose their church school, their faith-based university. They're going to have sort of drag brunch,
Hmm.
drag bingo in their public library. I mean, it's very much the gays will be allowed to be their teachers in their Christian schools, and they'll have to be forced to do gay marriages in their churches. So it's interesting that both sides, the left does have an animosity to church, and then the right
Hmm.
is really afraid of that.
What do you think about what Trump says about Christianity and to Christians?
Well, that we could do a whole show on that, Annabelle. It's a long topic, but
Okay.
my quick answer would be that from a spiritual perspective, I think he embodies what I would say is the dark side, meaning that I would say most spiritual teachings, but I'm a Christian, so I'll speak about that. Speak about hellish energy that comes from love of self and not love of others, and you eventually lose the ability to be empathetic or care. It's about you, and I think that he embodies that. It's not unusual among political or business leaders to have that rampant narcissism, but it's not a spiritual space to be in. It's a hellish energy, and so I would just say that on a spiritual level. Why evangelicals support him, or Christians, is a completely different thing. I think they know that he is a dark force. And that's what progressives can't understand. They are not naive about his personal life. I've heard a few of them say that he's now like born again and he's changing his life. But not really. What they've really decided is that the left is engaged in a secularization of America that will destroy the greatness of the country and will undermine God's blessing on the country, and it will undermine their children's future because they'll live in a nihilistic secular state, and they deeply fear that. And Trump, the way I describe it, I don't know if I've not heard anybody else use this, but it works for me. He's the protector in the neighborhood who says, do you want to make sure your window doesn't get smashed? Hire me and pay me each month. And if that's the case, when you want that person to be a thug. So they don't mind that he's vulgar. I don't, very few of them will defend the behavior,
Hmm.
but they'll say based on the alternative. And so I think that's why they do it. I don't think he's anything that I know about Christianity. There's no
Yeah.
overlap with him and Christianity. The irony is, and the paradox, I think, for Republicans is that I thought President Obama was a really devout Christian, and had read a lot of theology and quoted Tillich and Niebuhr and others, and said that and who knew who they were. Trump would not know who any of these thinkers were, who have wrestled with Christian thought in the 20th century. Uh, Jimmy Carter is, whatever you think about him as president, there's nobody who's kind of living out a Christian lifestyle um, better. And I think even President Bush, more on the evangelical scale, it seems to me he's painting veterans. There's some sense for me of repentance and a concern, and he spoke in a loving way at the funeral for John Lewis, and has worked to become good friends with the Obamas. So I think these other people who represent what I would say are more of a Christian tradition than, but I don't see any connection to um, Christianity. You could say he's in a
Hmm.
strain of Christian nationalism and more of a George Wallace populism that ties into religion, but it's purely a vehicle
All
for
right.
his own political ends.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I'm in agreement. I wanted to show you one more thing. So this is about obviously figuring out who's to blame. Tell me what you think about this. What do you see
Okay.
when you see that?
Well, I guess my initial reaction is it's very sad that both sides are using data on death to make a point that there's who and what is responsible for crime, because uh, there really is a epidemic of black on black crime. I mean, that's just a fact, and it is sort of glossed over. It's an uncomfortable thing for progressives to talk about, and so uh, but they're like, what's absolutely true in this is that mass shootings are almost 89 are white men. So I don't think that the data in here is necessarily wrong, but the fact that both sides are pointing the finger at the other race as an attempt to say this is what's really going on when it comes to murder and crime. And it's frankly a conversation we can no longer have as a nation. We can't really
Mhm.
even talk about this because if just what I said, that many of the murders that take place in cities are within black
Mhm.
gangs. Now there's a whole history and reasons and you know forced poverty over many generations that have led to it, and it's complicated. And so it's not about pointing the finger. It's just there is a certain reality that we ignore. I'd say a theme on the conservative Twitter is why doesn't this black life matter? And it's almost always a kid who's shot by a gang, and why isn't this being covered? Why don't I see
Mhm.
this on MSNBC? Why aren't there marches? Where's the ministers marching on behalf of this kid that was killed in gang violence? And that I don't think is really addressed. I don't think that's ever really answered. So I find what this bishop here is doing is pointing the finger at the white
Mhm.
statistics, and like the Bible, you can use statistics for whatever case you're trying to make, but neither is really trying to get to the you know how do we end
Right.
violence? How do we end murder? What's your
Yeah.
reaction? What was your reaction to that one?
The reason why I wanted to show it to you is because I think it supports what you're saying about how we want someone, I don't care how thuggish she is, we want someone to protect us because there's so much kind of explicit fighting over who's getting killed, who's doing the killing. It's so much about life and death. It reminds me of The Walking Dead. Just where people kind of are in survival mode because we're convinced that we're all going to die. We're about to die. Someone's trying to kill us. And so when we're in that survival mode, like, yeah, we just kind of gravitate in a very primal way to anything that might make us feel more secure. I spend a lot of time being afraid because I don't know who to turn to feel safe right now. I don't know. I feel very unsafe. I feel like I'm in danger. I feel like my life is on the line. I feel like, my family is under threat because of COVID and the fear that things could get really violent, um, either from his supporters or from federal agents. I guess I don't fear the Black Lives Matter protesters, but I fear the Second Amendment people. I fear Trump and just whoever is doing kind of his dirty work, showing up and rounding up protesters.
Yeah, well, I think let's face it, fear is at an all-time high. We are in the middle of a pandemic. People really are dying. We all don't know that we will be here in a year. We just don't know, and we don't know that we could be infected. So we're living with, on top of everything else that was going on, and all the data was showing that we were becoming more isolated and disconnected. A pandemic comes along that says get more isolated, get more far from people. So I think depression and fear are very high. The reason I shared those slides with you today, every one of them was emotionally frightening. Um, and there is I'll be blunt to say that the way that racism works at some level is that there is a fear of black people. So it doesn't say explicitly racist things in the memes, but the fact that so many of the players, even the most successful, Obama, Oprah, the mayor of Chicago, are African American. Um, I think it's deeply playing on a white fear, to be blunt, that goes back to when they were afraid that the slaves would turn on the mansions. There's a, there's a fear of the black community, and so these videos of young black men committing crimes in cities, which are horrible, by the way. That's the other thing the left can't say. We'd be better inoculating things if we could just say that's wrong and that's wrong. They're both wrong, but they're really playing to a deep-seated fear of loss, I think, among many white Americans, and that fear is probably going to be the most successful element for people who vote for Trump. I think that'll be the driving force for people who, the swing voter who votes for Trump will have a sense of fear of what happens if the left takes over. So sadly, we're in a situation as a country where fear is permeating everything, and both parties have learned to, in a way I've really never seen it, scare you against the
Mm-hmm.
opposition.
Mm-hmm. I just want to share one last one.
Sure.
I really am interested in this group, people who didn't vote. And I've spent a lot of time trying to understand them, trying to find them, talk to them. And I can't say I'm an expert at all, but I know that they hear noise, they feel confused, they get overwhelmed, and they don't really know what the answers are. So they just feel like they should not bother voting. So I met quite a few like that, especially among immigrants. They're like, I don't know. I don't know what to think.
Hmm.
And then there are a lot of people I met who are so cynical, like, it doesn't matter who it is, who's in power. I don't have a good job. My community is a shithole. Um, I have no hope that I'm going to have a better life than I currently have, or definitely not better than what my parents had. And so they just are so cynical, so depressed, I guess. And so I don't think it's that they don't give a shit. It's just that they have given up on people really paying attention to them and really trying to fix things for them. And so I just want us to kind of get back to the kind of politics, a kind of rhetoric, kind of discussions where we help the people, one, figure out how to make sense of things, and also to actually help people who really need help, who don't have jobs, who don't have health care, who don't have right nutrition, and who don't have any retirement plans, and who are working to death until their 70s and 80s because they don't have a retirement plan. I want us to figure out how we can really actually help that group. And I don't mean to say it as if they're so different from mine, because I feel like I've had moments like that when I just feel like, does anyone really care to fix the problems, or is it just about getting elected? And even though you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat, and we definitely disagree on things, but could we start to have these conversations where we just really try to solve these problems, instead of just kind of taking this role as like, well, let's talk about it at this level of almost like a meta level, like how we're doing politics, as opposed to actually problem solving. I want us to problem solve. We have so many.
Well, let me give my reaction to this slide. One of my biggest
Oh.
frustrations with progressives is that they are snide and condescending and kind of elite, and that slide kind of reinforces it. You better get your shit together. It's very like, do any of us respond to that message? Has anybody ever said, Annabelle, you better get your shit together and do something? And you're like, thanks for that point. I'm going to do it. So that message, which is, I think, I'm sure it happens on the right, but the left is really
Yeah.
condescending. That 100,000 voters in that slide that you shared, the reality is, because of the way our system is set up right now, we don't have ranked choice voting. We have winner takes all, past the post voting, it's called. It means that in a lot of places, your vote does not matter, just point blank. That's just the reality. So one thing is, for a lot of people who are busy or working, showing up to vote doesn't matter. They live in a state that is going to go for the other party, and so they just don't show up. Uh, and so that's not an illogical decision based on like getting a babysitter or leaving work early or whatever it is. Like, yeah, but I know where I'm going to go. So that's one reality. The other is, I've heard from many people that, I've had a Republican mayor, I've had a Democrat mayor, I had a Republican president. I haven't seen any change in my life. I haven't, none of it, all the rhetoric, and it never gets to me. So I think that's actually true as well. So I think that, so their logic is, you say it's so important and you're so obsessed about the Supreme Court or whatever, but it didn't affect my daily life. I think we should take those people seriously. Then there's some people who are just lazy, and that's just a whole other factor. And that's the America. You have the freedom to be lazy, and that's another, I think a big mistake. I think voting is a responsibility, but it really trying to understand why that third of the pie doesn't
Mm-hmm.
vote is would be is a worthwhile endeavor. I've been part of groups that are really looking into that and doing polls and doing interesting focus groups. But just to kind of say, get your shit together, I just find those kind of things
Yeah.
um, just don't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, definitely not. Well, here's the thing is I crave conversations where it feels like we're all working together as fellow Americans to solve problems. I feel that should be the essence of our democracy.
Hmm.
And I don't see that happening anywhere. Definitely not in Congress. And where can we do it? Where can we do this? It's my question. Can we
Yeah.
figure it out?
Yeah.
Because that's what I want. That would give me hope if I can get together with people and start problem solving and presenting ideas to the public and to our representatives. Like, can we actually help people? Because that graphic, oh, let me go back in case people forgot. To me, like this graphic should say, we better start giving a shit about them.
Yes. Much better.
And yeah, and like that's not happening. So they don't give a shit because we don't give a shit about them. We are
Yeah.
just too caught up in winning.
And the,
And so
and the
that's
people in the
anyway.
Democrats and the Republicans are a lot of those are ideologues. I mean, they're not even thinkers. They're just like
Mhm.
automatons for their party. So, they might think they're great because they voted, but they didn't give it a lot of thought. So maybe these
Right.
people are thinking about things. I'm very curious about it. Annabelle, the reason I want to do this podcast with you and I enjoy doing so much is because I'm with you. We better start learning again
Mhm.
the time honored skill of having a conversation with people we disagree with, and start to show
Yeah.
respect for each other. And you asked where it's going to go. One of my answers to that is, I think we should be doing this in churches, and I'm
Mhm.
trying to put together a whole training because I think churches, a sanctuary, safe place, have avoided politics for all the right reasons. I understand why, but we need a place where varieties of people can sit down and
Mhm.
not agree. That's not the key. Not even to achieve conflict resolution. I'm less interested in that. But
Mhm.
find a place where they can actually
Mhm.
disagree but love each other. And that I think is the key. And I
Right.
think churches, I think Christians and
Right.
other people of faith have an obligation to take a lead on that and bring that back into the culture.
Yeah, I mean, but in the meantime, because of COVID, we can't
Exactly.
really get together anywhere. What if you and I started inviting some of our friends and see if, like, even if it's just one other person, because you and I are friends, right? And so even though we disagree, I never feel afraid that you're gonna judge me or stop being my friend, right? But so there's some other Republicans, like I do feel very intimidated around them because I feel like they're going to judge me,
Hmm.
and that they're not going to listen to me. They're going to dismiss me or whatever. But I want to get over that and see what if we just started talking to one another.
Let's do it.
I'm
I'm game.
curious. I just want to know. Like, let's just forget about all the wrestling that's happening and like what let's tackle a problem together. Like what would it look like? What would it sound like? I just want to feel like that excitement that I've had about democracy when I've seen it work, when I've seen citizens really engage and make changes together.
And what I like about that, Annabelle, is that it also humanizes the
Mhm,
opposition. In other words, when you hear people who are real human beings struggling in their daily life to make it, and they have a political viewpoint you disagree with, but you see that they share all the struggles, mainly in many cases, about life that we all share, it humanizes it too. So it's not just the Trump
mhm,
voter or the Bernie bro or the whatever names we give to people on either side. It really could
mhm,
be a human being who has come, through a logic of their own, come to a different conclusion. And
mhm,
you know that in the trainings we have done, and you and I have participated in them, the first skill set is to be curious. Like if you disagree with somebody, instead of writing them off, like that blows my mind. I'm so curious how they came to that mindset. And that
right.
requires empathy to get into their shoes. And I think we've got to
Mm,
bring back empathy, the ability to see something in another person's perspective. I
right.
do also feel that we're coming into a Civil War-ish period. I hope not. So I don't know that I'm hoping and praying I'm going to keep fighting that we could continue this training and teaching and showing people how to do dialogue. But uh, I think the time is quite urgent before when
Mhm,
things break down, authoritarians step in with weapons, and we're not immune to that. Though people think we are,
mhm,
we're not immune to that as a country, and we have to
yeah.
prepare for that. And so we better
Mhm,
we better get our act together.
mhm. Okay, I'm ready.
All right, we'll have
All right,
guests.
thanks, Rich. Let's talk
It's
again
always fun,
soon.
Annabelle. Always
Yeah,
fun.
it is. I definitely appreciate this conversation.
I do too.
Okay, talk to you again soon.
All right, take
Okay.
care.
You've been listening to Conversations About a Way Forward from Count Me In to Win and The Talk on Main Street. To learn more, find us on Facebook at The Talk on Main Street.